Hey guys, I hope everyone's doing well. I hope that you are healthy and all are having a good time. Understand we only have about 4 weeks left of this class, and so I have to rush a few things. It's been hard trying to balance, all of these things that have been happening and this curriculum. So this is all new territory for me. So I'm used to having time in the class where I can, determine the pace a little better instead of just giving stuff out. So we're going to rush through a couple of things. I hate to do this because I feel every country is important, but I've had to pick and choose some of the countries in South America and Central America that are going to be outliers, as I call them, as in they have very, very unique cultural experiences and very, very unique cultural events that take place in them. So I think that it will become apparent as to why I chose the countries I did as we go through this and you see what we're covering. So we're going to start with Brazil. And in Brazil, one thing that's the most interesting about Brazil is it's the largest country in South America, and it actually speaks Portuguese and not Spanish, like a lot of the other countries in South America. Not all of them speak Spanish, but most of them do. And Brazil doesn't. They speak Portuguese. The capital of Brazil is Brasilia, and that is kind of a newer capital. The capital before Brasilia was Rio de Janeiro, and that got changed. And mainly, I don't know why. To be honest, if you did some research, that might be pretty cool to find out. I like to believe that it's because Rio de Janeiro became such a cultural capital to them, with Carnival and everything happening. They probably wanted to separate their capitals with their government, which would be in a different city like Brasilia. But that's just what I like to believe. That's not the truth or anything. It's just a guess. But I welcome any of you to look into why they did change. Now, I did mention Carnival. And so Carnival is one of the biggest things that happen in Brazil. And it's this huge celebration. And basically, it happens on the Friday before Ash Wednesday, and then it ends on Ash Wednesday before Easter. And this is a chance for everyone to just go crazy. They go out of their way to be extra during Carnival in the best possible way. So, they make these giant floats, they have fun, they get in character, they dress up, and this is a whole process that almost the entire country gets behind. So Carnival is this huge celebration, and it carries with it its own type of music. And this music is called samba music. And samba, the way that you can really tell that, the way that you can differentiate samba from other types of music, well, it's the instruments that are used inside of it, but also because samba is done in a steady 2-beat pattern. So, instead of, we're used to hearing the 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, samba is done in a 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, very much like a march. And that's for a very good reason. So why is a march in 2? Well, it's because when you're marching, you're doing more than just listening to music. You're actually marching. And how many feet do we have? The normal person normally, I shouldn't say normal, but the average person has 2 legs, 2 feet, and so that's why it's in 2. You can go left, right, right. And that's the exact same reasoning behind samba, because samba was meant to be played with these large carnival parades as they're going down the street, and people are moving along with that. So, they're moving with their feet. They're marching along. 1, 2, 1, 2. So I want you to really try and listen to the samba music that I am going to put up in Google Classroom. And I want you to go along with that and try and find that 2-beat pattern. Do it in your head. 1, 2, 1, 2 as it goes, and it'll make sense to you. Now, let's talk about the instruments that are used in samba, because we're going to get some interesting instruments here. So first I want to talk about the agogo bells. So the agogo are basically the thing they're most similar to are cowbells that you would recognize, but they're totally different. They're conical in shape, and there's 2 of them attached. And so one is a higher pitch and one is a lower pitch. So bum 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 bum. You'll get kind of those types of sounds from it, and that's the feel that you get from the Go-Go Bells. Added to that is one of my favorite cultural instruments, the cuica. So the cuica is a drum, but it's interesting. The drum on the inside has a stick that you hold onto, and you can move the stick around, and it creates this wee 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 type of sound. I can't imitate it, but you'll hear it. You'll hear it in the samba music. It's this weirdly squeaky sound that is created by this drum called the cuica. Other than that, we have the pandeiro. And the pandeiro is basically a tambourine that is used, a tambourine style drum. It's got a membrane over top of it, but it also has its rings, and that is used in samba music. And the surdo is kind of the bass drum. So you're going to hear this boom, boom, this big bass drum sound that goes along with the samba music, and that is going to be always done with the surdo. Now, the last instrument that I want to talk about with samba music is basically apitos. So apitos are whistles. So you'll hear them at the beginning of a samba. So before the samba starts, you hear them like someone blowing a whistle, and it just basically gets the samba started, gets the emotion going, and they're basically leading the whole song. So yeah, make sure you're looking at all of those things, those videos on Brazil. Enjoy them. Enjoy the Carnival one. It's 33 minutes long, but you don't have to watch the entire 33 minutes. You can. I mean, it's a lot of fun stuff, and they have really cool things in there. It's just breathtaking, the stuff that they do during Carnival. But, watch at least 10 minutes of it, and so you can get the full feel of different things. Moving on, we're going to go to Argentina. And when we're going to Argentina, we're also kind of touching on Uruguay, because in Uruguay and Argentina is where a cultural phenomenon started, and that is tango. So tango started in both of the capitals of those two countries. In Argentina, the capital is Buenos Aires, and in Uruguay, the capital is Montevideo. So those two capitals is where, roughly tango originated. So tango kind of originated from a lot of African slaves that were brought over to those countries to work and such. So it kind of brought this Afro beat to it, this sense of rhythm. It started with those kind of dances. But it really started to develop and grow into something new inside lower class areas. So we're talking about the miners, we're talking about sailors, we're talking about port towns, where life just sucked, okay? Life sucked. And they needed to find a way to entertain themselves, or else they were probably going to kill each other, get into fights. It was a rough time, rough neighborhoods. And so they invented this tango, which was this very overly sexualized type of music dance with some very interesting music. The music originally was only done with a squeeze box, which could be an accordion or a concertina, like we mentioned before with polka. And it's developed to where they've added guitars, and they also even add violins and some modern tango mixes in music. So yeah, this started as a way to relieve the stress, to give a little bit of levity to these people's lives. And what happened was some filmmakers in about 1913, 1914, even before that, maybe went down into Argentina. They saw this tango, they saw this lifestyle. They're like, oh my gosh, this is so romantic. This is so amazing. I need this in my films. And so they decided to add it to films. And that was the world's first view when films came out, the silent films, and then later on some bigger films in the 1920s and with the sound. They brought out this super hypersexualized dancing and made it over the top. And so the world was then introduced to tango. So that's when it started popping up in clubs all around the world. New York City had a huge tango scene, as did some areas in Finland, believe it or not, and other places around the world started catching on. But it was still super raunchy, super hypersexualized, and the world at whole just felt this culture shock. They did not want anything to do with tango. Only dirty minded people would dance tango. It wasn't for the proper person. However, it got bigger in the 30s and 40s, and then fell again in the 50s, when everyone was all about this wholesome lifestyle. But then in the 60s, when people were all about freedom of expression and all about, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, guess what comes back? Tango. So tango came back into the scene, except this time it was brought into a different type of scene than being overly sexualized. It was brought into the ballroom dance scene and was seen more as cultural than as sexual. And now it's an official ballroom dance, a cultural dance. And that's where we are today with modern tango. Yes, it's very beautiful. Yes, it's very sexualized, but it's done so in respect to the culture and nothing else. So it's really come a long way since its humble beginnings inside little taverns from these sailors and miners. So yeah, so that's tango, and that's from Argentina and Uruguay. Moving on, we're going to Peru. So Peru, for those that don't know, it's up in the mountains, and most of it's up in the mountains and is very cold. And a lot of the people that live there are descended from the Inca. So the capital of Peru is Lima. And as I said, the Incans, they lived in Peru, and they established settlements all throughout Peru, and also other areas such as Ecuador and the surrounding areas of that part of South America. Now, the Incas were pretty interesting because they established most of their settlements in high altitude places, and one of the most famous settlements is Machu Picchu. So we're going to watch a video on Machu Picchu, and it's really just an incredible thing. Machu Picchu is one of the wonders of the world, which is one of the new wonders of the world, but it's amazing. It's up there with the Great Wall of China and the pyramids of Giza and Taj Mahal and all of that, and even Angkor Wat, I believe. So it also it's believed that it was in the 15th century. It was the Incan capital, and it sits on about a 2,430 meter high mountain face. So it's pretty high. You would actually, you'd be short on a little bit of oxygen up there. It's nowhere near like Mount Everest, but you could definitely feel the elevation. So that's Machu Picchu. And one thing we're going to talk about with the people there in Peru is they have what's called sicuri music. And sicuri music is done basically with sicuri, which are panpipes. So it's pretty cool. They were used for a lot of ceremonial reasons and also for a little bit of secular celebrations as well. Okay, so now we're finally moving. We're going to move into Central America. This is going to be our first country in Central America. The next week we're going to focus more on some Central America places and some of the islands in the Caribbean. So we're going to head to Mexico, and the capital being Mexico City, of course. And so just as the Incans were over in Peru, here in Mexico, we're going to hear more about the Aztecs and the Mayans. So mostly the Mayans. The Mayan people were mostly in the Central America area, Nicaragua, Honduras, and Panama. All this area was Mayan territory. So you're going to watch a little something on the Aztecs, the Incans, and the Mayans, just something really short, just so you can learn a little bit more about them. And basically, what we're going to talk about in Mexico, the reason we're focusing on Mexico is because it's just so rich in very unique cultural experiences. So the first of these I want to talk about is mariachi. So mariachi music, as most of you probably know it, it's instrumental and vocal. The instruments that are used in mariachi are going to be guitar, violin, trumpets, and voice. And the thing about mariachi is it's done in a very interesting way. They all wear very beautiful costumes that are nicely embroidered with designs, usually gold or silver designs into a black costume. And the voice used for mariachi music is kind of operatic in a way that it uses vibrato. If you don't know what vibrato is, a vibrato is that shake in the voice. So straight tone would be if I sang ha. Vibrato would be ha. You hear that more in classical music and in opera. And so you actually hear it in mariachi music. You want to have that vibrato. And they also add a little thing called a grida, which is kind of a yell at the beginning. If you've watched Coco, then you know that he had to work on his grida when he went out in front of the crowd and before he did Un Poco Loco. So those are things that you're going to hear in mariachi. You also have to know that mariachi comes in many, many, many forms. Some of them could be, I call it maypole mariachi, which is basically the mariachi used in festivals and other things like that. You have restaurant mariachi, which is more for entertainment. You could be in a restaurant and they're playing or on the stage. And then you even have things like funeral mariachi, where they will play at a funeral because, you know, death is not something that is completely sad in Mexican culture. Moving on with that concept, you're going to be watching something about the Dia de los Muertos, which is also known as the Day of the Dead. So a little bit about the Dia de los Muertos is it begins on October 31st and ends on November 2nd. So technically it's Days of the Dead, not Day of the Dead, but it's still called Day of the Dead, Dia de los Muertos. It's an old tradition that has changed a little bit over the years. It used to be more familiar, which means it stuck with the family, but it's become more communal over the years because of more attention that's been brought to it in modern times. They've even added parades to it, which they didn't have parades before, simply because it was a Hollywood movie that did scene in Mexico, and they put a Dia de los Muertos parade in the movie, and I guess someone thought, oh, that's a good idea, let's do that. So it's an ever-changing tradition, but there are some things like ofrendas, which, you know, are offerings that you would give to visiting ancestors that are a staple, that never change, that are always going to be there. So yeah, that's basically what I'm going to have you watching today. And understand that get your field journals done, get this done, and you'll be caught up. I will be adding a test for Europe sometime this week that you can take at your leisure. Also, I found there's another, you guys love the series Most Dangerous Ways to School, so I put up the one for Mexico, and you're not required to watch it, but I know that you guys like that series, so if you want to look that up, have at it. Have a great day.